Okay, hello, welcome to Crabs, Goats and Goats. My name's Anthony Wilson, and I'm so happy to be joined today by Janelle Belgrave. And some of you, well, a lot of you will already know who she is, but I just want to this time introduce her properly because last time she was with me, I was so nervous on my first time, didn't even introduce her properly. So hello, Janelle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I've had a little break over the Easter. I've not been doing so much, which has been nice just to relax for a bit. Okay, so you're an astrologer and you're an acupuncturist. So tell
hmm
us a little bit about that, please.
what would you like to know exactly?
Um, well, what comes first? I mean, I think you started astrology quite young, didn't you? In terms of your interest in it, how old were you when you first got into it?
I did. I think I really stumbled into astrology around probably my first Jupiter return, because that's when I had gotten my first personal computer of my own. I have Jupiter and Aquarius in the third house, so it makes sense. I get a computer and it gave me all this access to information. And one of the things I found was astrology. Prior to that, I did have an interest. I was into, like, the newspaper horoscopes, and I would go to the library occasionally and pick up things, especially in the what was labeled the occult section, because it was always just something that I felt drawn to. And astrology was always there, but I think having it through the internet was a different thing. I guess that's when things really started to change for me.
And I'm curious, what were there any influences around you that were drawing you to astrology? Were there family members or books you picked up, or what was the first things that drew you towards it?
I can't really remember. I knew that astrology was something that my family liked, like something that we kind of talked about in passing. Like I knew that both my parents were Aquarians, born 2 years and 2 days apart. I knew that my brother was a Cancer sun. I think my older brother was a Sagittarius too. Like I knew these things from a very young age, and I was very curious about them because I was wondering how is it that these people all came about and we all have these different charts and personalities. So when I got my first computer, I found a website. I don't know what it was called, but basically you could put in someone's birthday. There was no birth time or location, just the birthday, and they generated this entire like read up on this person, and then you could also compare them. So I had done this for like my entire family, like my mom, my dad, my brothers, all of us, and I was just blown away because it was so accurate. So you've heard this story before, but I went to my mom and I was like, "Look, mom, look at this amazing! Don't you want to see?" And she was just like, "Get that out of here!" But she didn't tell me no. So I was like, "That's not a no, that's a yes." And so from there, it was just me constantly researching and reading and going to the library and studying, and that was just my first steps of astrology.
And did you find it in your teenage years? Did you have anyone to talk about it with, or did you find that you could talk about it with your peers, or was it kind of a subject that people were not interested in?
Um, I mean, I spoke about it with my peers a little bit, but they definitely knew that it was my personal interest. They were more interested that I was interested in it and like what I could tell them about themselves in whatever little capacity I could. So that's probably like my first foray into like trying to understand other people and reading about their traits and specifically my family and my friends. But thankfully, I never really came across any resistance or shaming or anything like that. Everyone just kind of accepted it was something that I was interested in, and that was just one of my quirky traits.
Um, okay, right, let's get into it then. First of all, I want to look at the transits for this week. Um, so let's have a look at the planets today. I'm just gonna, uh, this is for earlier today in Barcelona, so move it forward to tomorrow. Mercury has gone into Aries. It's moving very quickly through Aries, and it's in mutual reception with Mars in Gemini, building up to the new moon in Aries later this week, and then Venus was kind of running concurrently with the Sun all the way through this week. It's finishing its conjunction this week and next week. Are you feeling the energy, the Mercury in Aries? Have you noticed anything or felt anything coming through the last few days?
I mean, if anything, I think for me personally, just feeling a little bit more clear-headed, a little bit more, having a little bit more direction. During that really tough Pisces season, I just felt like thoughts and ideas and plans would come to me and quickly leave me. So at least now I've actually written down my list of things I have to accomplish. So at least it's in front of my face and I can tangibly act upon it. But that just was not the case when Mercury was in Pisces.
Right. I think, Saturn in Capricorn and Saturn in Aquarius this year, from last year to this year, they're both very much a strong, dose of realism. And when Mercury went into Pisces, I actually really enjoyed it. I know it's not supposed to be at home in Pisces, but I just enjoyed the kind of a bit more dreamy detachment from my point of view, that I didn't feel so ground down at that time. And now Mercury's back in Aries, I kind of feel that there's an urgency coming in, especially to the way people are communicating.
I would say urgency, but also urgency followed up by action, so it's less of that I had a plan, it didn't happen, more like I had a plan, I'm going to execute it, and here's what time I'm showing up. So like, for example, my mom yesterday, she was just like, oh, I'm coming over with your food, I'm going to call you and, come downstairs, that kind of thing. So it was like very bop, 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 and it was finished. Versus with Mercury and Pisces, what she actually is, it would have been like, oh, I'm coming, and you didn't pick up the phone, and where are you? Like that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then if we look a bit further towards the weekend, we can see the new moon jerking around the screen. The new moon for the 12th of April, that is next Monday. So it's a week today. So Venus conjunct the Sun here. It's not too unfriendly, this new moon. It seems quite positive, maybe good for fire signs. You have Sagittarius rising and Sagittarius sun sign. Quite positive for somebody with a fire ascendant.
Yeah, I can see how it is. I mean, there's a little bit of tension with Pluto squaring the Sun, Moon, and Venus. But I think that can be, finally feeling the pressure to evolve. That's a square dynamic that we see between Aries and Capricorn. And a lot of times people feel a lot of fear around squares, but I always tell my clients, like, if you put two sticks together, like a cross, that's a square, right? That's 90 degrees. And if you start to rub them, eventually you're going to get a fire. Everyone likes fire. We like light, we like warmth, we like electricity, we like that, but we don't like the friction usually that comes with making a fire. But I think that's something that I think in general people need to become more comfortable with. Like, not all processes of becoming are comfortable. And maybe that's something that has become kind of a mythos in our world, that, things just spontaneously occur and there's no fight or friction on the back end to make things happen, right? And this is something that I was thinking about, especially now that we're in springtime, thinking about what happens inside the cocoon of a caterpillar, right? We love butterflies, but we don't really know what happens inside that cocoon. We don't know how painful the process it is to grow a brand new exoskeleton and produce wings and all this stuff. We just appreciate the end result. But it's the cocoon process that I think is what the squares are really about. If you want to turn into something else, you have to be willing to go through a little bit of fire to get it.
You made some really interesting points there. I'm just trying to, but it is a square from Pluto, and Pluto doesn't necessarily do this. It doesn't necessarily spark, does it? I mean, it makes us kind of go inward a bit and questions, really asks us, what are you made of?
Exactly. So I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know what the percentage is of unborn butterflies in the world. I don't know how many cocoons don't, come out of it. But I'm assuming that there are a percentage that just don't decide to make it to the other side. Like, maybe I was content being a caterpillar. I have no desire to evolve. This is too hard. I'd much rather die, which would be a very platonic process. I've decided not to go through with this. Versus if you go through with Pluto and you go inward and you really look at yourself and look at your strength, you might find that you do have it, but it's just the willingness to go through with it.
So square Venus as well at the same time, and actually that square is pretty exact on the day of the full moon. Would certainly have something to say about relationships for people with that house, that Aries house, whatever that house is in your natal chart. There may be something happening around that day that's to do with that, or around those few days. You would think, but yeah, that's pretty. I mean, Pluto in Capricorn, when it was conjunct Saturn last year, or in sharing the sign with Saturn for a couple of years, it seemed extremely heavy, that whole Capricorn energy with Saturn and Pluto there. And now it's left on its own a bit. It's quite interesting to see how it's coming and going in terms of the themes, but they're still around, these Pluto and Capricorn themes. Authority, judgment, quite like it's almost heartless, the level of oppression that it seems to be dishing out. Like it's heavy. Pluto in Capricorn has been. I mean, I saw somebody on Twitter the other day saying that they couldn't think of anything positive about it, like from the start of its transit, which is like 2010, 11.
2008.
I'm not sure I go that far. I do think that the level of awareness of issues such as abuse has risen. And it seems like abuse has risen during that period, but also the level of awareness about it has increased, which may be a good thing ultimately. Power relationships are a lot less. It's a lot less easy to get away with certain things in power relationships than it was at the beginning of Pluto in Capricorn, or at least not be called out for stuff. That's one thing I'd point to as a plus point, but it also has its ramifications in where it's going in terms of the USA chart and the Pluto return, which I'm not on top of, but I think you might know more than me.
Well, Pluto in Capricorn is essentially part of the beginning of the United States, starting with the Declaration of Independence and all the things that transpired. However, I was listening to our friend Samuel Reynolds earlier when he was talking about Pluto and Capricorn, and people kind of forget all of the things that were leading up to that breaking point. A lot of emphasis is on taxation without representation, which is still a big portion of our story right now, right? And here in the US, we're dealing a lot with, corporate welfare. How come these major corporations aren't paying any taxes back into the pot, but reaping millions and billions of dollars, off of consumerism and whatever else? That's one element. The other element that he spoke about were the redcoats, which was the British occupation of the colonies and how brutal they were to the people who were living there. And we're seeing that again with our hyper-militarized police, our police brutality. Right now, there's an officer on trial right now for essentially murdering someone in public view on video, on tape, right? So, the fact that we even have to have this trial, it speaks to these underlying themes and issues that we've had for a very long time around power, around violence, around abuse of power, around money, also Venusian things too, because in the US, the Pluto is in the second house of our chart. So there is a Venus element of it too, which is the power that is used to make money and all the things that we've done to make that money, right? What are the ethics around it? And because Pluto is in Capricorn in this very Saturnian kind of sign, sometimes it's a very cold way of looking at the way that we make money, right? If I have to exploit you or rape you or kill you or do whatever to eventually get my money, I'm probably going to do that. And I have done that, right? which is interesting when we look at the history of the US to the UK, because the US is just the baby brother of the UK, which is the original imperial force, right? Or one of the original imperial forces. And here we are, 200 some odd years later, kind of reliving these patterns together. We're both going through very similar political situations. We're just getting over Trump, but we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a very large fascist rising element in our country that's very dangerous and very armed. And then looking across the pond to the UK, I see a lot of the similar things happening too, but it's a little bit different, right? It's a different country, different culture. But I do think it's important to watch those things and not dismiss them out of hand, because we can see the pattern. We know what happened the last time, right? A full-blown war happened, and including a separation. And now here we are, not at a war state, but we have some very interesting things in the news between these two nations, right? We have Harry and Meghan, which is the marriage between a British royal subject and an American citizen, right? One of which is half Black, which is another element of the story. And now we also have an Irish American president in Joe Biden, who has has memories of family members not being too kind toward the British because of the interactions between the Irish and the British, right? So, or the English, I should say. So all of this is coming back around, and it's happening in a very public way. So I just think it's fun to look at history and then look at the present and see where the overlaps are.
Yeah, it's still a bit early to know how that Biden presidency is going to work out. He's in a situation where there are a lot more questions than answers, at the moment. And I still can't call that. It seems a bit difficult to know which way he's going to go, because he's already surprised me on a couple of things, especially foreign policy. Because his foreign policy decisions have been especially in terms of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, have been a bit bolder than I expected, let's say. But this Pluto kind of karma feel of America, like coming back to examine itself and turn itself over. Some people are fairly pessimistic about that in terms of how much work needs to be done and how much work has been done in terms of really, I mean, every country wouldn't stand examination at the minute in the West, in a sense. I mean, it's not just the USA. You mentioned Britain, and I mean, identity is a real problem right now in the UK. Because the Brexit people cling to a British identity, but this British identity is really confused now, because Scotland doesn't want Brexit, or didn't vote for Brexit, and Brexit has fueled their desire for separation from the UK again. So I do feel that this is a worldwide problem. Is in a sense, as countries are having to confront parts of themselves they don't necessarily want to confront at the moment. I mean, the same thing's happening in Brazil with Bolsonaro, where they brought in a very right-wing president. His popularity's quickly gone down, but then if you replace him, who do you replace him with, and what do you do? Who are we really? This seems to me, since Saturn and Pluto conjoined, this seems to me a really big issue at the moment, and COVID has kind of compounded it, really.
Well, if anything, I think it's a question of who are we really in relation to the material world, and also the world of hierarchy, right? Because I feel like those are two things that are very Capricornian, this desire to have a sense of authority or status, and the things that we do to achieve those things, and how moral they are, immoral they are. So, I think for all of these nations that you're mentioning, if we were to go back in time and look at what Pluto and Capricorn was doing for them the last time it was there, we'd probably find the same stories coming around. And I just, and I think those stories are very important to look at and read about and review, because I think people are finally seeing the importance of history and the humanities, especially after so many years of having a hyper reliance on tech and math and stocks and financial affairs. If you don't know your history, if you don't know your past, you are going to repeat a lot of miserable parts of your past. So I think that's where we are. We have to decide, do we want to still be who we were 200 years ago, or do we want to evolve and be different? The planets haven't changed. We've changed. It's always going to be about how we respond to what's given to us. That's all. So for that, I feel hopeful, because I think more people on Earth are becoming very tired with being told that it can't get better.
Right, and I found myself becoming quite pessimistic recently, perhaps because of what's going on in the UK, but people don't seem to have a problem with the Conservative government in the UK. That it seems genuinely popular, in the sense that it's popular enough to stay in power. I think it's very unpopular with the people who don't vote for it, but that's for me the fact that, I don't know, 40%, 37% in the polls is actually supporting this. It's like, well, I don't understand it. I don't really understand how it could be popular. But anyway, on the theme of the UK, you've been writing a lot this year about Harry and Meghan, who you talked about a little while ago. So I just want to put that into an astrological framework. So I've got Harry's chart first of all here. Again, in the UK, the public reaction to this, stoked by the media, mainly the tabloid newspapers, has been anti-Meghan, especially in the sense of Harry's popularity, which has dropped by something like 20% in the last 2 years, since they started to vilify Meghan for basically anything they could find. So let's look at his chart. We looked at it before, but let's look at it in more detail now. I've got whole sign houses set up here. I mean, I think that's your preference. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay. So ascendant Capricorn, sun in Virgo, moon Taurus, earthy. I mean, I think I said before, it takes a lot to move a chart as earthy as this out of their own country, doesn't it?
I would say so. But I think there are parts of Harry's chart that does speak to him, obviously having a connection with abroad, right? He's a ninth house sun in Mercury in Virgo. There's some part of his life that might be elsewhere, right? He's worked abroad, he's worked in the military, he's fought abroad, now he's living abroad. So this is not that big of a stretch, in my opinion, for him, right? He's also Jupiter rising. So there is an element to him that does like expanding and moving beyond what he knows. In an earthy way, in a practical way, he's not one to just rush out and do things. So when people kind of infantilize him and make him seem that he's been controlled by his wife, I was like, have you seen this man's chart? I don't think anyone has really had full control over him, truly. And I think history will show that. From very young age, me and Harry are very close in age. He's only about a year or so older than me. But I remember having an idea of who he was, and the main theme around Harry was that he was just different from everybody else, right? He acted differently, he responded differently, he looked different, right? He was the redheaded son of Charles and Diana. Like, there's everything about this guy that just was a little bit off to everyone else he was around. So to me, and as a Black woman, it's funny because prior to him meeting Meghan, there was me and other Black women on Twitter who were just like, this, he's going to marry a Black girl, right? And then Meghan showed up. We were like, yes, and there she is. Because, it's funny. I believe there's an astrologer by the name of Alice Sparkly Cat, but she did an amazing article on this 11 degrees of Cancer Capricorn. I'm forgetting the name of the star, but essentially there's a lot of themes around rejection regarding this placement. And what does Harry have on his ascendant and descendant but this 11 degrees of this sign, right? Like so, and here comes Meghan with Mars and 11 degrees of Cancer, and she cuts him out of these relationships that he's had with people, right? So in a
Mars is
way,
on his descendant.
to the degree in second,
Mm.
right?
Ooh.
So this is a very, and that was Sam actually pointed that out. I hadn't noticed that before, but yeah, she essentially motivated him in a very martial way, Mars and Cancer, to protect his family. And so they moved, right?
Mm.
So,
But you would associate a Mars on a descendant with somebody that brings you, brings you action and makes decisions, kind of energizes you into doing things. You would put that into a relationship with Mars on the descendant. And if you're one of these royalist astrologers, like pro royal family astrologers, you could just argue that the other way, couldn't you? That she's the Mars telling him what to do or not.
possibly, and it's very possible. However, if you look at what carries descendant, it's in Cancer, right? Cancer's a sign is ruled by this moon in Taurus, and in this case, he has it in the fifth house, right? So he would be deeply motivated to take action on behalf of his children, right? For his sense of comfort and his sense of home and family, because he also has his IC there. So I don't think it's more Meghan telling him what to do as much as him feeling an instinctual urge to do something. Because remember, this is still a man who lost his mother at a very early age, just shy of 13 years old. So in that 11 to 12-year-old range, really intense things were happening for him, right? Very traumatic things.
That seems to be represented by the Saturn Moon. They're not opposite exactly, but opposition by sign from the MC to the IC, like either side. So the midpoint of it, that opposition is right on the MC, right? It's like, so you there's a lot of sadness there, isn't there? There's a lot of
and also probably feeling pulled in two places too. Like, do I follow my moon and my heart and my comfort and my joy with this exalted moon in Taurus and build this new life across the sea with this beautiful woman and my children? Or do I feel a sense of duty and responsibility and oppression with this Saturn Pluto MC dynamic, right? The firm, this establishment, this structure that I was born into that hasn't really been really great for me, right? There's a lot of loss involved. The South Node is in there too. So it's familiar. He knows how to do it. He does it really well. He's an authority, right? Prior to this happening, he was the second most popular royal. If his grandmother wasn't there, he'd probably be the first. So he's good at the job, right? But it's always going to be this back and forth for him. What do I follow? Duty or love? Love or duty?
Okay. Saturn being duty and the moon being love. Okay, so that's interesting. 29 degrees, south node, north node in Taurus, south node in Scorpio. Now this is the degree of the eclipses right now, yeah?
We have a partial eclipse happening November 19th at 27 Taurus, yes.
Oh, you've been looking for this. you've been thinking about this. So the end of November, we're going to see him getting eclipsed.
Partially, yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that could be interesting.
It could be interesting for sure. He's being pushed in this lifetime to go towards the moon a little bit, right? Because he does have the North Node conjunct the moon. So right. Far, he has chose family and love over duty. Right. That was the first test. So let's see around the eclipses if he's rewarded for doing so.
That moon in Taurus must be hurting a bit, with this kind of strife around that attachment, It cannot have been easy for him with this chart emotionally to separate in the way that he's done, or they've done, I should say, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And that's something that I feel like was very much overlooked during the process of this. Like, yes, there's a lot of attention on Meghan, which is fine. However, I was like, this is such a public and deep betrayal to have happened to you in the public eye, for your family to just essentially abandon and reject you. And say, oh, well, it's either her or us. And for you to be put in that position and feel kind of, I would assume very heartbroken over it. because in a way that's a rejection of him too.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Meghan's chart.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it. Actually, I've got one on from astro.com here. I'm confusing the types of chart. Here you can see 4th of August 81. So she was born just before a Saturn Pluto conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
Sun, Mercury, and Leo. These are Plastus houses. In the second house, whole sign houses. Moon in the 4th, conjunct Jupiter and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is an actress chart, isn't it? The Leo Libra combination, but the discipline of Saturn, which people forget in acting, is quite a thing. There's a lot of discipline in acting.
Mm-hmm.
And Sun combining as a sextile with the Sun. I mean, you could see how, I mean, with or without the media treatment that she received, that the life of a royal in the UK would be a little bit suffocating for a chart like this anyway.
Let me see. Let me think about her chart again. You know, the thing is that she was still able to do it really well. That's the problem. And yeah, it would be difficult for her, but I think that's the point, because here's someone who's a professional, right? This is someone who had a life, a career, made her own money, you know, did the whole thing and had the skill sets necessary to do this job well and was able to do it really well, right? We saw some really great work from her during the time that she was there. What we also saw was a lot of sabotage and, you know, underhanded stuff as well. So I don't think it was so much the lifestyle. I think she was fine living with Harry and doing the work. What wasn't fine was the obvious sabotage and undermining activities and all sorts of intrigue and stuff like that that was, you know, happening on purpose to her.
Yeah, she probably expected the royal families to be good at their jobs, like proper professionals, but they're not. You know, they're just born into it. They don't have any.
Yes.
I mean, they're. I can't imagine. I mean, we don't know what they're like behind closed doors, but she probably wasn't too impressed with the way things get done.
Probably not, but this is a Libra moon, Saturn, and Jupiter, Venus, and Virgo. So she probably would have seen all this, but right, how can I help? Right? But that's probably the wrong thing to say to people who don't believe they need help. And they definitely don't need help from a biracial American, do they?
No doubt at all. Yeah. I mean, it took a long time for me to be even interested in this story, because I take no notice of what happens with the royal family. They never surprise me in their lack of ability to feel any way real to me. But so I'm not surprised it all panned out the way it did, because the press are looking always to satisfy the racism of their readers, and she just was the next convenient person that they could find. The one before that was a football player. Actually, she kind of, what happened was I mean, what I think. I think these days it's like, oh, you can't be obviously racist, so you have to target a black person that's really, really good at what they do. It's very, very prominent, and then say, well, it's not because they're black, right?
Yeah.
So Raheem Sterling is a football player. He's probably the highest earning black British football player, English football player, and he was constantly in the press for doing things like buying a car, taking a holiday. Oh, look at him on holiday. England just lost in the World Cup, and look at him on holiday. That was basically the headline. One of the stories that they were running about him. And he came back and started rallying against it, and he achieved a lot on Twitter. Like, okay, this is the story about a white player who buys a house. This is a story about me buying a house. Look at the two. And he actually did a whole education program. And people were like, okay, yeah, this is we see this, we understand this now. And the press laid off him for a little while. And then they went for Meghan, and I didn't think there was any sort of coincidence about that. It was just that it's like one to the other. Okay, she can replace it. She can replace him as our latest person to make readers feel hate, basically, which is what we're talking about here. So
Yeah, but I think she's a little bit different because she married into probably the highest, privilege rankings system. I don't, here in the States we don't have that, but I'm assuming if she was to come in and marry the president, that'd be similar for us, but we have a very different cultural dynamic to our ruling family because they're not really a ruling family, right? So her marrying into the top ranks of the UK society added another layer of hatred and anger because how dare she? It's one thing to be a footballer, right? And do the things that people have stereotypically dubbed Black people to be good at, right? You're good at sports, you're an athlete, right? It's another thing to be Black and marrying, the highest rank of privilege and also being good at the job to the point where you're showing up those who have blood status. Right. So again, coming up to these Pluto and Capricorn things, the lineage, our ancestry, the time immemorial, we've been doing this for so long. Who is this upstart showing us up? And then kind of dismissing and dismantling all of our perceived reasons why we should be in control. We're white, we're powerful. It's just like, but she's not those things, and doesn't need to be those things in order to be good at the job and to be popular, which is probably the biggest issue. To be popular, which is this seems to be a very big theme in this family around jealousy and popularity and just not being very supportive to one another. Because to me, as an American watching this, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. These two were, knocking their projects out the park, bringing positive publicity to the country. This was a golden egg. All they had to do was be nice. That's all they had to do.
Yeah.
And to see that even that was too much, and now to see the fallout that's probably going to continue for quite some time, it just feels very dumb.
Yeah, opportunity wasted completely.
Yeah, and that's what all these isms are. They're not based in anything real or tangible. It's just beliefs that are stuck and stagnant and serve a purpose, which in this case for this family is to maintain their sense of power and control. Because in reality, it's just we should be asking about Prince Andrew, right? We should be asking about his friends who are getting caught up in issues, right? We should talk about Prince Charles and his connections to the Saudis and all the backdoor, wrangling and dealing to get arms to who and why, right? We should talk about all your offshore accounts and where the money is going and why.
I suppose this is why I kind of zoned out of British news and ideas, because I saw, they know, people who support the royal family against Meghan, they know all this stuff's going on and they're deliberately ignoring it,
Yeah, because this is when the fantasy starts to fall apart, right? And this is the scary thing, and I'm very curious for you as a former UK citizen. It's just like what happens when Brexit is fully, activated, and you guys are fully isolated, and the money's not coming in. Like this is a tinderbox for really terrible things to start happening. And we know the first group of people to get the hit are going to be people who look like Meghan and darker and queer and other. So this is why I'm nervous watching it because I know how things transpired here in the States, but that's a smaller environment than ours.
Yeah, I'm not living in England, Britain, so I don't know exactly. And obviously at the moment things are not in any way normal anyway, so it's hard to know how that's playing out in terms of relationships between people. But the Brexit stories are coming every day in terms of lost trade, lost sales, lost exports.
And I've seen the numbers
grow and grow.
And these are really terrible numbers. Like not like 2%. We're talking about 30, 40, 50% of import or exports are down. Like this is devastating for an economy. So I do wish my UK watchers lots of luck and love. Please don't give in. This new thing about trying to make peaceful protests illegal is a big red flag and not something that should be allowed to happen on any front whatsoever. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right.
Review your
So,
history. National Front. I was watching. Not a good sign.
sorry, what?
I was reviewing some of the National Front documentaries and
Oh,
things like
yeah.
that from the 70s and just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
perusing and just being like,
Well,
yeah.
the National Front never became as popular as the Front National in France, who were really quite big political party,
Mm-hmm.
because the Conservatives, Thatcher in the 70s, basically looked at their popularity and just took a lot of their like triggers that she put a lot of stuff into speeches that the National Front supporters then went to the Conservatives, because they saw them as the anti-immigration party in the late 70s, basically because of the messages she was putting out there. So yeah,
Always anti-immigration.
that was there was in the music world, there was a rock against racism. I mean, they called it rock against racism, which now sounds it sounded bad at the time, actually, but it was like this musical artists against racism. There were a lot of the concerts I went to in the early 80s, ska bands and people like that on the bill, free concerts. There was like even at that time, there was this kind of, you're for or against Thatcher. It's very much similar to today. It's like you're either against Boris Johnson, or you're supporting him, and there's a big distance between those two sides. It's quite marked. But one more thing about Meghan's chart is that I think we mentioned this before as well, but the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was very close to her, or was virtually on her descendant last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a very literal example of what was happening to her, right? This open enemy, Saturn, Pluto, this institution, right? And now later on, we've learned out just how desperate it was for her, where she was having suicidal ideations, and but at the same time, there's a lot of cult-like elements to what sounded like was happening. We're taking your IDs, your keys, your passport. We're isolating you. You can't see your friends. We're not going to protect you from abuse. We're going to gaslight you. So yeah, it would be a perfect storm to have someone break up and try to take their own life. Yeah, of course. However, I would say their biggest mistake was undermining the strength of a Sun conjunct Mercury on the North Node in Leo. Because in our whole signs house system, it would be in the second house. And this is someone who's come into life trying to learn how to have self-worth and self-esteem and self-respect and a sense of confidence, right? And she knew, like, this is not who I am. I didn't come into here a broken woman without a sense of self. So no, this is not normal for me.
She's the best thing that ever happened to the royal family, actually, in my opinion. People say Diana, but I say it's her. Because she's caused people to really question what it's about.
And it makes you wonder if Diana had the support and love of Harry in husband form, what would have happened to her, right? Because if Harry had decided to do duty, had Harry leaned into that South Node and Saturn and Pluto in the 11th house, he could have left her to take her own life. He didn't have to listen to her, right? He could have abandoned her and say, that's just how it is. So I think there's a lot of credit that needs to be given to people for actually following through on their chart and choosing to be brave. The North Node is not an easy place. It's uncomfortable. She has the South Node in Aquarius. She could have easily gone along with the group dynamic. She could have totally sucked into the group and, faded away. But she chose to stand up for herself. So good luck to them. I think it's important that they're in the public eye in the midst of all the negative stuff.
Do you think that's to do with Leo or Mercury? I mean, or both being conjunct the North Node?
I think it's both, right? This is someone, and again, this is something that I think people have to look at. This is the course of her lifetime. From a very young age, I think as young as 11, one of her first things, and her son is at 11 degrees, her first thing that she's known for was writing to commercials, because they had a very sexist commercials about dishwashing. And because of the letters she wrote, they changed the language of the commercial.
Oh, really?
And this is documented. There's video of this. So you can look her up. Meghan Markle, age 11 years old, doing this. So this is not unusual for her.
Huh. That's really literal, isn't it? That's
It's
really
very literal. She wrote beautiful
Mercury in
penmanship.
the
You know,
yeah,
she has
yeah.
Venus and Virgo in the third. She has beautiful penmanship. She's do calligraphy. But even at that age, she was writing these letters to get things happening for people.
Cool. Okay. Right. So the other thing that's been in the news recently is I mean, it's amazing what can cause offense or what can upset people, but the Lil Nas X video
Hmm.
for his new track.
Which I haven't seen in its entirety. So just so you know.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
I've seen clips. I get the general gist of it, but I'm not really in the space to watch music videos right now. I just don't care.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I listen to a lot of new music, right? I listen to music all the time, especially in sort of the hip hop genre, and I really loved the first record. But last year when WAP came out, I didn't listen to it for 5 months or something. And then at the end of the year, I listened to it. I was like, this is a really good record. I didn't expect this to be a really good record. And I looked at the video, and yeah, the video is not that great. And this was the opposite. I was like, listening to it, oh, okay. I saw the video, this video is superb. It's absolutely superb. I mean, the story is that he's ripped off, or the creator of the video, FKA Twigs, used the same creative consultant on her video for her song that came out the year before, the title track of her last album, which I momentarily forgotten, but let me find it, because she deserves a Cellophane. It's an excellent track, Cellophane, excellent album that she did. And it turns out that her video for that track is very similar. There's a pole dancer going to hell on the track.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which is
I've seen
her.
that video.
And I watched that, and I was like, I thought the song was much better than the video in that case, my personal opinion. But I thought that the Lil Nas X video was hysterically funny, as well as really, really suitable for the song, like the pitch of the song. But of course, it's funny when people talk about, this is something that actually, again, I'm going to mention Sam Reynolds again. This is something that he was tweeting about last year, but I've been thinking this for a while, since the tragic Paris attacks on the cartoon. What's it called? The
Hebdo or Charlie
Hebdo, yeah.
Hebdo?
So when this happens, people go like, well, this is because these countries don't have free speech and we have free speech, right? These other countries, they don't have free speech, but we do, so they don't understand why we can say what we want. It's just not true. It's actually not true. Every single country in the world, you can go too far with whatever is taboo in that country and be cut. And in fact, there was a march in England by Muslims not long after with banners, where they were demonstrating that you can't say this. And you can't, look, let's walk down the street and try it. And then they couldn't. They were stopped by the police after 5 minutes. So now we have a sacred cow, in a sense. I mean, in the literal sense of in the religious sense, let's say, bringing up this stuff against Lil Nas X, who, one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up is because he's an Aries. Don't have a time of birth for him. But you can see here the Sun and Jupiter with the Moon in Capricorn. I don't think he cares at all, actually, about the reaction that it's had.
I mean, and also I was playing around with his chart, and depending on what time he was born, if he's born after 8:25 in the evening, that moon's in Aquarius.
Right.
And by that chart, I would have it in the 5th house, which I kind of like, but again, you never know. He could definitely be a Capricorn moon. But I mean, to me, again, it's not really. When I say I don't care, it's not that I don't care. I'm just not. For me, like I remember Sinead O'Connor when she made us think. I remember when Madonna made us think. I remember like all these different phases of artists challenging the church and people
John
getting
Lennon in the
so
60s.
upset, right? People get so upset when you challenge the church. I'm like, but yeah, but the church deserves to be challenged. It's supposed to be challenged, and I think that's great that it's happening during this South Node in Sagittarius, right? We're dealing with philosophy and religion and church and all these different institutions that we give all this power to. But, that's no guarantee that they're going to be on the up and up, right? And we've seen that. And it's funny because this Sagittarius Gemini axis that we are on, we're examining how we use information and write information and document it, and whether it's propaganda and what's the truth of these things, because now there's a lot of religious scholars on Twitter or on TikTok talking about, yeah, the Bible has been changed a lot of different times over the years, right? And the language has been adjusted and edited to fit political aims of whatever the power structure was at that time. This whole hatred toward homosexuality is a not a mistake per se, but it's strategic, because the original language around it was actually against pedophilia, not homosexuality. It was against the abuse of young children, not men lying with men or with women. So now we're getting into this deeper stuff, like who changed this and why? Because then we're getting into this idea of like you have tortured and harassed and murdered a whole lot of people for no reason, for an aim that has protected a pedophile ring that's still functioning today, right?
I mean,
Who
he's quite an
benefits?
interesting figure because he made his. I mean, he before he was doing music, he was actually just manipulating the internet. He was making memes and stuff like this.
Mm.
He's really good at the internet. So when people challenge him online, he's having a great time on TikTok, just like
Yeah.
he's lapping it up. I mean, for him, it's more
Mm-hmm.
attention. It's more record sales.
Yeah.
So I like his energy. I like what he's brought through to the pop music scene. Being a pop music artist and having a very young audience. I think it's only positive what he's brought through. But I just think this is a really strong. It's a shame we don't have an ascendant, because I think you can see a lot of strength in the
You actually
purpose.
blow up his chart and I put it. Let's see the 8.
Yeah. So the 8:25
Mhm.
p.m. chart.
Just because I don't know if I think he's a Capricorn. I don't know. I don't know him well enough, but um, I don't know. I think that Libra rising would fit because he is a cute, attractive kind of guy. He dresses really well. He presents really nicely, and that would kind of push some of these planets, um, this Aquarius moon and Cancer midheaven, especially for his popularity in the States. We tend to see that quite a bit with artists. They'll have some sort of Cancer Aquarius because that would fit with the chart of the country as a Cancer Sun Aquarius moon. And just thinking about his notoriety, his fame, his catapult to fame, I think last year or the year before would have been during that Capricorn Cancer eclipses over his 4th and 10th, most likely.
Okay.
And then these Aquarius planets in the 5th. And also the Saturn of Venus in the 8th, I think would be interesting because his art is taboo at this point.
Yeah,
right?
true.
And that's part of his work and part of the stuff that he's had to overcome as a Saturn in the 8th, if this chart is right, is overcoming his fear of being rejected and taboo as well.
My Mercury in Capricorn can't handle no birth times. Looking at rectified charts, my mind just starts going like, but what if this can't be right?
What
like,
if. It's always a what if. However,
yeah.
I have had luck. Sometimes my spidey senses do luck out with guesses. And I feel like this one kind of fits well, especially with this North Node, South Node dynamic in the 5th and 11th. If his South Node is to use creativity for the collective and then to bring a sense of pride to his groups.
Oh, but having said that, I do remember when you were freaking out one day that your mother thought you might have been born in the evening. What is it, 7:25 instead of
in
the morning? And I was like, I'm sorry, no way. Like,
Yeah.
This I know. It's definitely AM. It's not. It's
Because what was I, Leo rising?
I can't remember, to be honest. But I
Think
looked at it and went,
so.
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
I
it's
kind of like this chart. I think it works. He's a sun, exalted sun in Aries, conjunct Jupiter. So again, the confidence, and that's confidence that he's earned, and it's ruled by Mars and Scorpio. So he's going to be okay. I think he has the chart to withstand the pressure that's going to come his way ultimately.
yeah. I mean, Mars in Scorpio square Neptune in Aquarius, very fitting for an artist living in this. There's a lot of fantasy involved in what he's doing. He's playing roles. Especially his first single, that really was, a big role play for him, and like an actor role almost, which he carried off really, really well. I mean, that was probably the most important pop single of that year, 2019.
Yeah.
Was it 2019? I'm losing track, but
Probably
yeah,
somewhere in there, but I think that would fit for him. But I think in the long term, though, I do think he's going to use art in a more challenging fashion, most likely. And we'll see what happens, especially now that he's going to be eclipsed too with this that November 19th eclipse at 27 is right on his Venus.
oh, okay,
It's at
okay,
27 Scorpio Taurus.
I've lost it.
So
Okay, yeah,
we'll see what
well,
that
that's,
brings for him.
yeah,
If anything, it's more money. He's probably going to make a lot of money.
I mean,
He's already making a ton of money. And he's not afraid to do it. He has no shame about it. He's challenging people because how dare you be different and queer and black and dare to want to have all these things that we have told you you cannot have because you are what you are. Right? So it's very similar to Meghan, right, as well, right? How dare you flaunt the rules that we have set in place that don't make any sense, but and you're proving this by just existing and living and being who you are.
I
And
think,
that, yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily my role to speak on it because I'm neither, but being black and gay in the United States seems to have changed a lot in the last like 12 years or so. I mean, especially in the music scene, I mean, you can actually name a score of artists that are black and gay and out and doing well right now. The latest album, My Serpent with Feet, is absolutely brilliant. It's a beautiful production as well as great singing. I mean, he's a really good artist. So yeah, that I found that really interesting. When Frank Ocean came out in like, I must think it's 2011, 12. And this seems to have opened a door.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in my experience as someone who I identify as an ally and have a fair amount of, GLBTQ trans friends in my life over the years, my real beginning of that relationship must have been like 2001, 2002, when I had friends in high school who were coming out and really, figuring themselves out. We would hang out over here in New York City by the Hudson Piers, which at that point had been renovated and spruced up, and it had just become like a mecca for all these queer black and brown children in the city. And so it's been, now we are 20 years later, a lot of things have changed. That's when I first got exposed to a ballroom culture, and voguing and dancing and the music that came about, to the fact that now we have TV shows about ballroom culture and competitions around ballroom culture is mind blowing to me, because even when I was a teenager, that was still considered underground, fairly. So, to the youth who are listening and feeling frustrations, just like so much can change in a decade or two, in a
Right,
lifetime,
right,
and, to keep pushing because you are making progress, even though it seems incremental.
right. I'm glad you said that. Recently, I've not. It's been hard for me recently to. It's like, wait a minute, wasn't this happening in 1981? I mean, I literally just went like that a couple of weeks ago with something. I was like, this is exactly the same sort of popular idea that was going around in 1981 that was being sold off as normal. Um, I've been struggling a bit. Normally, my Venus and Mars in Sagittarius are very optimistic about the way things are going, and I can always see the progress that's being made in that sense of awareness. But it's been hard recently, so I'm pleased you said that. All right, so just looking at anything else that we were going to talk about. Oh yeah, Jupiter in Pisces is coming, right? It's not.
Yes.
It's really coming soon, and of course, it's only coming for a couple of months. It's from the end of May to mid-August, I think.
Yeah.
Where it creeps into Pisces for a couple of months before it goes back into Aquarius. And as a lot of people are saying, this is quite a shift, right? Because Saturn's been going through, Saturn rules signs for 2 years or four or 5 years, and it's still going to be in Aquarius the second half of 2020 as it is now. But going into Pisces, in terms of the overall atmosphere, we're overestimating it a bit, but it could be quite interesting in terms of opening things up.
Yeah, I definitely have my my reservations and my fears around that, only because we know that a lot of this COVID situation happened under Pisces, where we had some really interesting Pisces dynamic in those original charts, especially here in the States. Our contagion really happened during Pisces season last year. So for Jupiter to enter into the fray, especially when we're in this, people are starting to get vaccinated and people want things to open up, I'm a little bit wary of there being yet another wave coming through of another strain, which would kind of make sense, because they're already discovering that the vaccine does not prevent you from catching another strain or getting infected again. So that's going to be one thing. And then also what's probably going to happen, people might get sick. And then when Jupiter heads back into Aquarius, and I believe that's going to be actually July 28th.
Oh, is it? Okay,
yeah.
Late July, okay.
So when he goes back into Aquarius in late July, I think we're going to see people having to reformulate a lot of these vaccines. And, now that we have new information, because we know that Pisces things spread very easily in that sign. So that's my concern, but I am looking forward to the art. I'm looking forward to a lot of beautiful things coming through, and music, and hopefully charity and compassionate works coming through, but also people having to deal with the addiction, right? There's probably going to be a big hedonistic push, similar to what happened after the Spanish flu. The Roaring 20s were probably in the aftermath of the Spanish flu.
So that maybe a hint of 2022.
So we're probably going to see that, people in their flapper skirts and cutting their hair and just fucking to fuck, because it's been a long time, right? And that would make sense, because Pisces, again, it's a very fertile sign. It's a water sign. It does want to kind of re-nourish itself.
Yeah.
And after such a barren time with Jupiter and Capricorn,
Pisces doesn't really do limits.
No.
Does it? And when Saturn will still be in Aquarius next year when Jupiter's in Pisces, and later this year. But risk taking is Pisces tends to not calm down when it needs to calm down, let's say, or live, or not always recognize what it needs to do to stop something going too far. Let's say,
a lack of boundaries, a lack of limits, and also a belief that everything's going to work out, which it generally does. It is Jupiter. Jupiter does give us a lot of protection. We need some of that, though, don't we?
Yeah. We do need some of that.
So I think it's going to be a very interesting bag. I would just offer that people don't go too crazy. Continue to wear your mask and do your protocols, because we're still not out of the woods yet, as far as I can see.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about it. Probably too much, because I just feel it's gonna, because of it's following stuff that isn't like it. It's following stuff that's very much different to that. It could very much feel like a breath of fresh air.
Oh, it will, but we're still, but because it's a retrograde, that does kind of show that we have to kind of review how we manage ourselves the first time around.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's already slowing down when it comes into Pisces. It's not moving very fast. Once it comes in, it's just slowing down its last 2 degrees.
And then it's also going to be in the mix of the eclipses. And while it's not going to be very tight to the nodes, it's still going to amplify whatever happens during that period of time.
Yeah, so the eclipses are happening in late May. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they're going to be very interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think the last month of Pisces season probably was a kind of a heads up for the things that we would see coming around again during Jupiter and Pisces and these eclipses coming our way.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure as always. And I hope you have a good week. And we're just recording this on Monday, the 5th of April. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you, Janelle, for joining me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.